Si no hay preguntas, next speaker is Antoni Serrano, that is coordinador de la unidad de agudos y urgencias del Hospital de Sant Boi, que va a dar otra visión de las aplicaciones tecnológicas en el área de la salud, y es una cuestión tremendamente importante, porque una cosa que es fundamental en la implementación de las tecnologías son las barreras que nos podemos encontrar en esa implementación, y una de esas barreras, que también puede ser una gran facilitadora, es precisamente la opinión de los pacientes y de los profesionales, es decir, la opinión de los usuarios. En este sentido nos va a dar su charla opinión de pacientes y profesionales sobre la aceptabilidad de la atención sanitaria electrónica en enfermedades mentales.
First of all, I'd like to thank Juan Miguel for his kind invitation. I hope that everything works, and I hope that you can understand my horrible English. I prefer to speak in Spanish, but I think 2 weeks ago someone sent me an email. I'm sorry, there are not translators, so you have to make your presentation in English. So I can escape, and I'm now here presenting you my presentation. Well, I think I can. 15 minutes. Okay. I'd like to present, first of all, which is the symptoms, which is the illness we are going to treat. Because, you know, depression is a word that everybody talks about, and it's not a clinical word, it's a social word. If you are sad, you can say I'm depressed. But when clinicians talk about depression, we talk about specific symptoms. So the first thing I want to explain to you is what is a depression for the clinician, from psychiatrists. You know that our Bible is a DSM-4, it's a classification book, and these are the symptoms that are in the diagnostic of major depression. You have to at least present 2 typical symptoms. You have to have a depressed mood. You also have to have a disposition of interest in the things you are used to. So these are the 2 key conditions. If you don't have any of these 2, you are not depressed. You are sad or something else, but you are not depressed. And the other things are different symptoms, and you have to have at least 4 of them in a quite high intensity. So if you are sleeping a little bit bad, and you are a little bit sad, and you have a little interest on things, and you are a little bit stressed, probably you are not depressed, right? So when we talk about major depression, we talk about depression that are clinically specified things, and with a significant impairment in your social work or in your social life. So if you don't have any impairment, you are not depressed. Probably you are sad, or you are having a bad week, but you are not depressed. I think it is a very important thing to know, because we have depression as all things in our mind, and we have to clarify that this is depression. And this illness, it's quite high prevalent in our society. In Spain, I think a study conducted in 2006 found that the lifetime prevalence is almost 10% of the society. So 10 of the people who are here now will be depressed during his life or her life, and it's quite an important proportion of people in the society. And in primary care, as a psychiatrist, I work in a hospital, but I also work in a team, working together with primary care physicians. You can see that the prevalence is quite high. It's 20%. It's almost 20% during the last year, and almost 0.5% of the people, 50% of the people in the whole life. So almost half of the patients that are going to primary care, they are going to be depressed during his life or her life. So it's quite an important disorder to take into account. And what we know about this kind of patients, those primary care, is that more than 10% live alone. So they don't have any support home when they are depressed. And if you know somebody who has been depressed, or you know a little bit about the syndrome, you know that people are more time at bed, they do not eat the food they have to eat, they lose weight, they are slow in the movements, slow in the thoughts, and they also have suicide ideation. So in these 10% of patients, it would be very useful to have some tool at home that can help them to improve their depression. That's not only the doctor or the nurse or the medications, it's probably they need more things, and this could be developed by a clinician. Also, you have to know that depression has a lot of burden. You know, I don't know if you know which are qualities, it's what, or DALYs, it's a measure of quality of life, right? So depression is the most important condition as others that decreases the quality of life of the patients. In this table, you can see that chronic pain is the highest condition that produces annual loss of quality. But this is because the prevalence is really, really high. But if you only have one of these conditions, avoiding the prevalence, the most condition that loses quality is depression. So you have to choose which of these conditions are you going to suffer in your future. Please don't choose depression. You can choose high blood pressure. And what are the costs? What does this cost to the society? We make a study in Catalonia calculating the cost for the whole society, and it was really, really high. And the annual cost for a patient is 1,800 euros per year. And you can imagine, if you have 10% of your population having depression, just multiply for this, and you can find a really high amount of money invested in these areas. Well, this is the quite typical circular way of evolution of this kind of illness. But first you have a diagnosis, you are going to be diagnosed probably by your GP or by a psychiatrist, and you're going to be treated, and you're going to be followed up, and probably you're going to relapse. In 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years, I think half percent or 50% of people who are depressed relapse in 2 years. The most important condition to relapse is to drop out from the treatment. And 50% of the people who begins a treatment drop out the treatment in 6 months. And psychiatrists recommend the treatment has to be followed at least 1 year. So it's quite, I think it's a very hard work to do with patients to don't drop out medications and follow up the treatments as the GP or the psychiatrist said. And I think this would be a very, very goal for the very interesting goal for the combination of technologies and GP. So there are a lot of examples that I can show you. They have been published or they are sold by the internet. Some of them are free, and some of them are available in the National Health Service in the UK or in Netherlands or in Australia. At least I think there is no kind of treatment like this in Spanish. Ayuno. Bueno, but we don't know. In the public health service, we don't know this kind of stuff. Okay. Well, what is health and mood? I think there will be speakers that are going to explain you what is health and mood more deeply. I only want to show you what is and what does it tries to do. It tries to reduce depressive symptoms, to improve functioning, and to prevent relapse and recurrence. Why? Which is the way we are going to do this? With a continuous monitoring of mood and activity, identifying relapse signs, and improving adherence to treatment. How? Using CCBT, psychoeducation, relaxation, and some other specific focus interventions that the patients need. This is the global design. You can see 3 parts. The first is what is going to be monitored and where, at home of the patient probably, and which is the second step, the interaction with the avatar, and the third step is how this information and which of this information are going to be provided to the GP or to the psychiatrist. So what we want to do is know the opinion of the psychiatrists, of the GPs and of the general population about these kind of systems, because you know that most important is to know their opinion, because if you design a very sophisticated tool but the patients are not going to use them, why do you design this? Okay, one of the most interesting things on this project, the Healthy Mood project, is the interaction between the avatar and the patient. Probably the patient is going to provide some information to the avatar, and the avatar is going to process this information and to provide some treatment to the patient. I think this is quite new, because you can provide the information exactly what the patient needs, not everything for everybody, right? And this could be very, very interesting. These are the avatars designed by our Italian friends, and I think this is the most important sentence in this presentation. It is important that well-designed surveys and qualitative studies are included alongside trials to determine levels and determinants of patient acceptability. If we don't do that, we are blind to their needs, we are blind to the success. What we've done is 2 different kinds of studies. One study was a qualitative study. There are 3 focus groups. We've done in Spanish, we've done in Spain, in the study. We've done also in the UK, and we've done also in Romania. I'm going to show you only the Spanish results, because I thought that it was only for Spanish investigators, so I think it's more useful for all of us. And the second thing is we make a cross-sectional study asking directly to different kind of patients, what do you think about these? And also we've been asking about some different conditions, how and when they use their technologies, trying to understand if this kind of cultural conditions can influence the choice of different avatars or the acceptation of this system. The qualitative studies, it was conducted last year. These are the rules. I think you can understand that it's a typical qualitative study with focus groups of a few people, 6, 7, 8, 10 at least. And we pay them because you know that they have to come, they have to take time, so we pay them. And they were asking about what do you think about this system, the general system, and which are your needs? First group we conducted was a group of psychiatrists, or my colleagues, so it was quite easy. I said to them, okay, just come to a meeting and we are going to be asked about this system. And it was conducted in our place of work, and they were, you know, voluntarily included because I'm their boss. So it was quite easy for them. So you have to come to a meeting, and nothing else. Right. Yeah. So their general opinion about the system is that it could help GPs to improve the diagnosis, and this could be very helpful to prevent relapses, or to detect relapses early. It was quite interesting because psychiatrists thought that it could be useful for GPs, and GPs thought that it could be useful for patients, and patients said, I don't want to lose my doctor. So it was quite nice in this point. But they also thought that GPs should need technical support, because there are, you know, I don't know if you've gone to your visit to your GP recently, but most of them are talking to you but looking at the computer.